Did the Rams dodge a bullet by not making a recent trade? On today's episode of the Rams Report, we're going to break down how, by avoiding making a decision that the Rams were being connected to, a trade that the Rams were being rumored to be interested in, they actually dodged a massive bullet on two fronts. One from recent news, actually both from recent news. So that awaits you on today's episode of the Rams Report, my friends. A bullet dodged by Les Snead and Sean McVay. But before we get into that, make sure you're locked in, guys, because this Rams offseason has been absolutely insane. Who knows what's coming next, whether it's an extension for somebody, another addition to this team. I don't know. You don't know, but don't miss a minute, my friends. Hit that subscribe button today and stay up to date with everything that Les Snead and Sean McVay have up their sleeves, because my gut says they ain't out of moves just yet. But one thing they're definitely not going to do is trade for A.J. Brown. These rumors circled the Rams for a long, long time. We talked about him on this channel. We absolutely did. And I will acknowledge, I was more often than not a pretty big fan of the idea of the Rams making a move for A.J. Brown. Again, it just goes back to the idea of, hey, if we could have done this and kept Devontae, kept Puka, this would have been an unbelievable receiver trio for Matthew Stafford. With a guy like A.J. Brown coming in, over 1,000 yards receiving last year in what was generally considered a down year for him, he was still a 1,000-yard receiver. You go back to 2024, and he did that in 15 games. In 13 games, he was almost an 1,100-yard receiver. The last season, he played 17 games. Last two, he went over 1,400 yards, my friends. This dude would have been a pretty electric addition. If you could have kept the remainder of the receiver room together and brought in A.J. Brown, you would have had a core that would have been pretty unstoppable from an offensive perspective. So I won't deny, I was a fan of adding AJ at the time. But then we got this report a couple of weeks ago. Mike Florio said one of the reasons why the Rams had backed off trade negotiations was they got scared by the, quote, preliminary medical research. He said it was too much of an investment for a player at his age. And I remember reading that at the time and being like, okay, but what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, preliminary medical research doesn't give you really any details on what the Rams might have discovered that scared them off. Obviously, it was something serious, though. But now that AJ has arrived in New England, now that AJ has been traded to New England, we have the full details on the medical concerns. It was revealed by Yahoo Sports and by Patriots general manager Elliott Wolf in a pretty surprising decision to disclose a massive, I would say negative, of their latest acquisition. And again, a huge reason why the Rams dodged a bullet. We're going to get into the details on that in just 1 second, my friends. But before we do, I've got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, guys. It's America's #1 sports picks app, our friends over at Prize Picks. Guys, if you love daily fantasy sports or you just want to add more excitement to watching sports, you've got to try out Prize Picks. It's a great time to get started on Prize Picks, too, with the NBA playoffs underway and the baseball season in full swing as well. There's no better place to get in on all that action than Prize Picks, and it's never been easier to play than it is with Prize Picks. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players. You're selecting more or less on their stat projections, whether you're picking from points, assists, rebounds, hits, home runs, or strikeouts, or if you want to go with some of their picks on professional football, you can go with stats like sacks, receiving yards, and rushing yards. And guys, that is exactly what I chose to do on my latest lineup. You can tail me or fade me using either your Ojos in your head, your 2 eyes, or using Prize Picks' social feeds features. You guys could drop a follow on my username. It's Jackson Durham, just my first and last name, no spaces in there. And you guys can see all the latest lineups that I have been placing, including that one on professional football. But if you're new to PrizePicks, make sure you use our promo code. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with PrizePicks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments in the description. As always, big thank you to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's show. Let's get right into it, though. The details on the medical concerns for A.J. Brown have been revealed, and guys, they are worse than I ever would have expected. Here we go. According to Andrew Buehler-Ross and Jory Epstein of Yahoo Sports, shortly after the trade was completed, Patriots Vice President of Player Personnel, also de facto General Manager Elliot Wolf, spoke to Yahoo's Jory Epstein, where he revealed that Brown has, and I quote, a degenerative knee condition. Wolf then said, it is a factor, but we examined him. He's got a knee that has some wear and tear that we were aware of. Our training staff and medical staff signed off on it. Did they? On a degenerative knee condition? Because I'm not a doctor or a physical trainer or anything. I have no medical qualifications whatsoever. But the one thing I do know is you need your knees to play football. At the end of the day, those are two incredibly important things to any functioning football player or anyone who wants to function in anything that requires running whatsoever. So I'm going to say at 30 plus, this is a really smart thing to avoid. If I was Les Snead, I would have made the exact same decision around A.J. Brown. Knowing what we all know now, it is pretty easy to see why Les Snead and Sean McVay looked at this guy and said, hey, A.J., you're a great player, but we're not giving up what we'd have to give up to go get a guy who we cannot trust to remain on the field consistently, who we don't know if this knee issue, which is chronic, by the way, it hasn't kept him off the field consistently throughout his career, but he has had to have it drained several times. He has missed time in not extensive sections, but minimal time throughout his career due to this knee issue. And as he ages, it is only going to get worse. Again, that is the dictionary definition of the word degenerative. It continues to degrade. It only gets worse. And when I look at this Rams receiver depth chart, I see exactly why Les and Sean stayed away from this move. Look at this room. You are not desperate for an A.J. Brown. You do not have to go get A.J. Brown. Would it be awesome? Would it have been really cool if you would have gotten A.J. Brown and then he would have been able to remain healthy and you could have had the best receiver trio that maybe has been assembled in NFL history? Yeah, that would have set Matthew Stafford up for success for sure. But you know what? Matthew Stafford's already set up for success. He's coming off an MVP season. Like, at the end of the day, if your alternative, if the path to making this receiver room better was take a risk on an A.J. Brown who could have a degenerative knee issue, give up a first-round draft pick, which we'll get into that a little bit more, for a guy who may never be the same just to improve a guy who's already performing at an MVP level and surround him with more talent. Like, again, we'll go back to it, but the alternative move that you made earlier this week could not have been made if you made this one. And you look at the Patriots, the team that did ultimately trade for A.J. Brown. And I think it's pretty apparent, like, yeah, okay, they're a lot more desperate to make a decision like this. They're a lot more desperate to make a move to upgrade this receiver room, to surround Drake May, the MVP runner-up, that came up just short to our guy Matthew Stafford, but a great young quarterback in this league. No disrespect to Drake May. They need to surround him with more weapons. So they feel it is worth it from their perspective to take that chance. That's one of the biggest issues they're facing. But it wasn't the biggest issue we were facing. The biggest issue we were facing was defense. Our defense was not able to consistently get stops in the games where it mattered most last season, especially against the Seattle Seahawks. That was the end of the story. Offense was incredible in the NFC Championship game. You get a few more stops on defense, you win that game handily. That's why Myles Garrett made more sense for this team. That's why Myles Garrett was always going to make more sense for this team. I don't think many people knew he was an option at the end of the day for this Rams team. But when you compare the two, of course you take Myles Garrett. And what's involved in the Garrett trade? A 2027 first round pick and a 2028 second. They ultimately gave up a 2028 first round pick, but I genuinely do not think that you can move off of 2 consecutive years of first round picks and then also have a conditional first in 2029. It's just too much draft capital when you don't have seconds in 2028, you don't have a third in 2029, you don't have a third in 2027. You would be picking 2 times in the first 3 rounds over the next 3 years if you had made an additional move for A.J. Brown. It was always going to be one or the other. It was always going to be A.J. or Myles Garrett at the end of the day. And I think the Rams truly made the smartest decision for themselves, both to address what they really needed to address and avoiding a potential medical disaster with A.J. Brown. Again, I'm not rooting for that. I hope A.J. Brown is able to stay healthy. I hope A.J. Brown's degenerative knee issue is able to continue to be managed in the ways it seems he's been able to manage it over the last couple of seasons. But all I'm saying is I don't want to take that chance at the cost of a first-round pick. I don't think that's a chance worth taking. And I truly think the Rams dodged a bullet here. And now it's time to say thank you to Les Snead. I think we've got a number of things we should be saying thank you to Les for. So give me a TY in the comment section. Spam the TYs. I should see at least 100 TYs in the comments of today's video to let Les know how thankful the Ramily is right now for not only ducking A.J. Brown, but also finding a way to land us Myles Garrett. What an unbelievable GM we have. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode of the Rams Report. As always, we thank you for tuning in. And as always, let's go Rams.